Mabuhay! Let us give all of the distinguished panelists another round of applause. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining with us here in Manila, Philippines for this very significant Global Peace Convention, our first with an in-person gathering since the COVID pandemic. During that time, how much the world has changed. I want to thank all of our partners and stakeholders here and from around the globe who are adding their insights and expertise in key issues that we are all tackling together. And I especially want to express my great appreciation to our Filipino hosts, colleagues, longtime friends, and volunteers for their spirit, sincerity, dedication to the cause of building the greatest vision of all, one family under God. The theme for this Global Peace Convention, as well as every other convention from now on, is one family under God, a vision for national transformation and a civilization of peace. I ask you all to take a moment and pause and reflect upon the scope and the significance of that theme. Some might think it's far too ambitious, but may I remind you that the world is in crisis and a great vision is needed to chart a path forward. Ladies and gentlemen, we see confusion and conflict all around us today in domestic and international politics, economics, religion, and in the realm of ideas. Old certainties are being called into question everywhere, and the methods of the past are proving incapable of meeting the challenges of the present. The world of peace and harmony that we all hope for, that would emerge after the end of the Soviet Empire, with the twilight of the 20th century, never came to pass. We saw that the seeds of conflict and destruction of the 20th century continued on as we entered a new millennium with this global war against terror. The roots of this confusion lie in the oversimplified framework of the Cold War. It was framed as an ideological war between two competing political and economic systems, democracy and free markets on the one hand, and tyranny and communism on the other. The West proclaimed the end of the Cold War as a triumph of their systems over its rivals, often overemphasizing their merits. However, those victorious voices had forgotten the very spiritual foundations upon which Western democracy stood. There is no inherent virtue in either democracy or capitalism, for they are just systems. It is the aspirations, principles, and values that one pours into those systems that make them unique. In the case of the West, it was its Judeo-Christian heritage that defined that unique character. Remember that in the absence of an overarching, unifying vision that is morally rooted, democracies and free markets simply become an arena where competing interest groups game the system to vie an advantage at the expense of their rivals. The potential for mob rule and the tyranny of the majority had always been a weakness of democracy, going all the way back to the classical Greek period as well as the Roman civilization. There have been many examples throughout modern history where democratically elected governments have gradually extended their power and became autocratic regimes, most notably, in our recent memory, the rise of the Nazi Party during the Weimar Republic of Germany. The American founding fathers understood that the success of any political system was intimately tied to the moral character of its citizens. John Adams, the second president of the United States, famously said, and I quote, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other," unquote. The fourth U.S. president, James Madison, wrote that the Constitution requires sufficient virtue among men for self-government. Otherwise, nothing less than the chains of despotism can restrain them from destroying and devouring one another. Such views were the common understanding among that generation who were inspired by the Enlightenment philosophers. They find their clearest expression in the second paragraph of the United States Declaration of Independence, in which American founding fathers sought to assert the freedoms in the face of an obdurate British monarchy. There they explained the foundation of their claim, declaring that all human beings are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These immortal words articulated a fundamental truth, that our essential rights and freedom come from a transcendent Creator, and that no human institution or authority can revoke or restrict them. Without recognizing a transcendent source for these ideals, imperfect human beings and their institutions will inevitably curtail them, citing some greater collective purpose decreed by the almighty state. The American founders clearly understood such flaws in human nature. They countered human claims to ultimate authority with the idea of God's sovereignty. The United States thus became a new type of nation founded upon ideas rooted in the Judeo-Christian principles that permeated its culture. The founding ideals was the political expression of a deeper understanding of a relationship between God and human beings, that we are created in the image of God, who is a source of our value and unalienable rights. The American aspiration to become one nation under God and thus be the land of the free was directly linked to the understanding that freedom is a God-given right of all people. God and the universal principles He created must be at the center of human existence. Recognizing and living by those principles creates true human value and dignity. That is the attainment of true freedom and the meaning of living under the sovereignty of God. However, assertive statist regimes such as China and Russia clearly reject this framework and actively challenge it. Despite the end of the Cold War and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, both governments uplift the power of the state above all else, with little regard for the rights of their own citizens or even their own neighbors. Such systems cannot be sustained indefinitely. In time, they will eventually be undermined, for they will violate the most sacred rights that God has given to mankind. Nevertheless, they remain a constant threat to peace and freedom, and their advances make it an important for every democracy to affirm the foundational elements in which the idea of freedom and fundamental rights are built and are rooted. Ladies and gentlemen, the American ideal of one nation under God was meant to be a model on a national level of what God desires for us to establish in a world level, where people of all religions, nationalities, races, cultures, ethnicities could live together as one. In America today, we are witnessing what happens when we take under God away from our daily life. Society loses its moral compass, as well as its sense of absolute values rooted in truth, righteousness, and goodness. Losing this unifying center, it fragments and devolves into different identity groups fighting each other for power over their rivals. This same phenomenon, unfortunately, is happening on the global level. Globalization promised to deliver a future of peace and prosperity, but it was focused purely on material values and needs. Understandably, it faced a serious backlash because it failed to recognize the importance of the moral and spiritual dimension necessary for an ethical and cohesive global society. As a direct result, religiously framed extremists and reactive nationalist movements have sprung up among groups who fear that globalism will erase their cultural traditions and local identities. That is why the world is fragmenting around us today, lacking any overarching or harmonizing vision. Clearly, we need to forge a new global identity that can embrace and harmonize the positive elements of the more localized identities. Such an identity must be rooted in the universal principles that all the great spiritual and ethical traditions share. Ladies and gentlemen, the world's great cultural spheres stand upon the foundation of major faith traditions such as Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism, and many others. The elements of truth which they express was a cohesive force that bonded local societies to have civilizational impact. The time is right for a movement that can unite these traditions on universal principles and values and establish a similar civilizational impact on a global scale that builds on the American ideal of one nation under God and expands it to build one family under God on the worldwide level. We must remember that as human beings, we all share a common DNA. Beyond our external differences, we are essentially all members of one human family who share the common origin in one Creator God. Our convention theme is bold, yes. It is visionary, yes. It is challenging, yes. Yet it can be a powerful catalyst for what humanity needs today. A transformative movement aligned with universal principles and values that renews hearts and minds, inspiring vibrant, new, and lived experience of how we relate with each other, to our fellow human beings, to the varied cultures of the human family, to the natural world that sustains us, and ultimately to the one God who is a source of our being and in whose image we are all made. All of these aspirations are contained in our simple yet profound vision statement, one family under God. The pursuit and achievement of these aspirations can lead to the transformation of nations, guided by transcendent principles and values grounded in them, and the emergence of a civilization of peace. The vision of one family under God shows us the pathway to true global unity in diversity and is the basis for future peace and prosperity for all. Realizing such an auspicious dream is no simple task. It takes concerted effort by those who embrace that dream and that cause as their own. Already the work is underway through the initiatives of the Global Peace Foundation and our many partners, developing effective models to transform communities and nations. Those initiatives are engaging moral and innovative leaders and utilizing a multi-sector value-based approach with remarkable impacts demonstrating that the vision of one family under God can indeed be the catalyst of transformation of nations and this world. Here in the Philippines, GPF have long worked with the Department of Education and other stakeholders to infuse character education, youth leadership development, and service learning into the educational experience of every Filipino student. Philippines is becoming a global leader in transforming education. Just yesterday here at the Global Peace Convention, key educators announced the launch of Transforming Education 2050, a global initiative promoting a practical plan to equipping a new generation to become moral and innovative leaders of tomorrow. On the divided Korean Peninsula, tremendous momentum is being built for major breakthroughs for peaceful reunification based on the Korean Dream framework as outlined in my book. The Korean Dream movement that I have been guiding is spearheaded by Action for Korea United, a coalition of civil society activists, organizations, NGOs, and associations that represents millions of South Koreans. Today, we have more than 1,000 partners united in the largest grassroots movement for unification in the history of South Korea. Central to our work around the world is engaging youth and building character. And I've always stressed the importance of learning through experience. At our Global Peace Convention in 2009, held here in Manila, it's deja vu, I called for the creation of the Global Peace Corps. And I'm very happy to announce that that day has come. That we shall be launching the Global Peace Corps here in the Philippines, but unfortunately 14 years later. The Global Peace Corps will be an important force in transforming nations and addressing global challenges. The goal of the Global Peace Corps is to tap into the idealism of youth and give it the tools to become the moral and innovative leaders who can promote social transformation through service, development, and peace-building projects. As a first major initiative beginning in 2024, I'm calling for the Global Peace Corps volunteers to support the Korean Dream campaign for building a new Korea that is free, unified, and a global model for peace. Can you do that, yes or no? Imagine if young leaders from throughout Asia and the world go to Korea and join the Korean youth who are right now in quite a slumber in this great cause for their nation. Amazing breakthroughs are possible with enormous positive impacts for peace and prosperity for that nation, that region, and the world. A unified Korea in which the vision of the Korean Dream is given practical expression will be a new nation of high ideals. It will be a powerful witness to the fundamental principles expressed in the United States Declaration of Independence, as well as being deeply rooted in its own historical cultural identity. In short, it will draw upon the best lessons from the West, while also looking to the ancient wisdom of Asia for new insights in the 21st century. Ladies and gentlemen, today we stand at a crossroads that will impact the future in profound ways. The choices we make today about the principles and values that will direct our lives, societies, and nations will determine whether humanity takes the path towards peace and human flourishing or to further conflict and chaos. In particular, the true spiritual leaders among the great faith traditions should take this opportunity as a challenge for themselves to recognize their divine commission to be the peace builders of the 21st century. I challenge such leaders to come out of their institutional boxes, their church boxes, their faith boxes, and work together to make the world into what God originally wanted to create, one family under God. Can you all do that? Yes or no? Yes. Then, may God bless you and your families, for you shall be the leaders of tomorrow that change this century. Thank you very much.